A human stands before an alien princess light years away, and she asks him bluntly why he has come to speak. What happens when his honest, unexpected answer shatters her assumptions and sparks curiosity across worlds? Elias stepped off the gravity lift with a little more wobble than intended, his boots clanking against the transparent flooring that hovered above the churning lights of Kelara 7. From this height, the orbital city looked like a lattice of liquid gold threaded through with violet streams of energy, and he had to resist the urge to wave at the hovering vehicles streaking past like neon meteors. He straightened, tried to pull himself together, and muttered to no one in particular, "Right, keep it together. Just talk to a princess. No big deal. Except, if she beams you into a containment pod for saying the wrong thing, that's a big deal." He gave a shaky laugh at his own nervousness, which did nothing to steady the wild flutter of his stomach. The crystalline doors of the audience chamber opened before him with a whisper of magnetic fields, sliding aside as if aware of his clumsy entrance. He blinked. The room was vast, impossibly so, suspended in a zero-gravity bubble that gave the impression of floating in nothingness, though delicate lights glimmered around the edges like captured stars. The throne itself was a translucent structure, spiraling upwards, refracting the ambient lights into soft prismatic patterns. And seated upon it, like she had descended from a dream rather than a starship, was Lysara. She was unlike anything Elias had expected. Her skin was pale with a faint iridescent sheen, almost like moonlight captured in liquid. Her long ears curved elegantly upward, tapering to points that twitched ever so slightly as she observed him. Her eyes were large, liquid, and amber-colored, and the precision of her gaze felt like a soft but unyielding probe, examining not just his appearance but the weight of his thoughts. She tilted her head. "Why have you come here to speak with me?" Elias froze, one boot awkwardly planted too far back, feeling as if his entire body had been rewired by surprise. He started, then tripped over his own brain. "Well, you see, I was told there would be tea." He tried to smile, a weak thing that made him resemble a very confused bird more than a human. Lysara's lips curved almost imperceptibly, and her ears flicked in amusement. Elias, mistaking the twitch for some sort of cultural insult, held up his hands. "No, wrong answer. Sorry, I don't have a manual for princess etiquette. Or, alien princess etiquette." He took a breath, realizing he was rambling to the ruler of an entire species. I mean, of course I came to talk to you seriously, but seriously is boring. Tea is also important." He paused, hoping some shred of dignity remained. Lysara did not laugh, at least not fully, but the corners of her mouth twitched, and her eyes softened slightly. "Interesting. Most humans attempt to flatter or deceive immediately." "You joke." "Yeah," Elias admitted, scratching the back of his neck as if the motion would somehow realign his internal wiring. "I figure if I can survive the first 10 seconds without being vaporized, I might get a few more minutes to say something meaningful. And also, sarcasm is cheaper than bribes." Her gaze lingered on him, and he noticed a subtle twitch in the crystalline panels behind her, as though the room itself was reacting to her mood. "You are not like the others," she said, her voice melodic yet precise. "They all come with speeches or petitions. You stumble, and yet you persist." Elias exhaled, the tension in his shoulders loosening slightly. "I persist because someone has to tell the truth, or at least attempt to. Plus, if I faint, I can always blame zero gravity." He gestured vaguely at the room, narrowly avoiding crashing into a floating orb of light that hovered lazily at eye level. The orb blinked in acknowledgement, or maybe in judgment, he wasn't sure. Lysara rose from her throne with a grace that defied physics. Elias instinctively straightened, though the gravity, or lack thereof, made his movements comically stiff. She glided toward him across the floating platform, and the lights refracted across her skin, making her appear almost ethereal. "Come," she said simply. "If you intend to speak with me, you must understand my world, not just my court. Words alone are not enough." Elias followed, stepping carefully, which in hindsight was ridiculous because the zero-gravity field rendered careful steps nearly impossible. He kept his arms out like a novice tightrope walker. Got it. Understand the world, not get vaporized. Easy, totally doable. He nearly bumped into a hovering flower that smelled faintly of ozone and strawberries, apologizing profusely to it. Lysara raised an eyebrow and he added, "Yes, I apologize to Flora now. It's a habit." The gardens were a marvel. Floating plant life spun lazily in magnetic suspension, their petals refracting the light into kaleidoscopic patterns. Small robotic creatures zipped among the flora, projecting holographic butterflies that pirouetted midair. Elias tried to keep up without looking like a disaster, quipping, "So this is what they meant by zero-gravity garden parties. I should have brought snacks." He tripped over an invisible energy filament and ended up doing a sort of awkward midair pirouette before regaining balance. "Nailed it," he said, though nobody believed him. Lysara's amusement was subtle but undeniable. Her ears twitched upward, betraying the tiniest trace of laughter. "You are clumsy, human, yet you continue. This is unexpected." Elias shrugged. "Persistence is sort of my thing. Also, I like to test the patience of aliens. It's educational." He gestured vaguely at the hovering blossoms and the glimmering orbs. "Like this place. Stunning, but slightly terrifying if you do know where to put your feet, or arms, or head." The princess stopped at a floating bridge of light that arched above a pool of luminescent liquid. She looked at him, her expression sharper now, yet still softened by amusement. "Your honesty is bracing. Humans are often indirect. You do not lie, you do not exaggerate. Even in jest, you are sincere." "Trust me, I exaggerate plenty," Elias said with a grin, "but not when the stakes are, life and throne threatening. Though I might exaggerate my own heroic qualities later if this goes well." He gestured vaguely at his chest in a self-important, if slightly off-balance manner. Lysara tilted her head, studying him as though weighing every fiber of his being. Then, without warning, she asked, "Do you understand why I question you?" Elias blinked. "Honestly, partially, because most humans would try to trick you into liking them. Also because my hat is ridiculous." He gestured at his slightly crumpled space travel cap, which he realized might be insulting or absurdly formal in this context. "It's supposed to be a peace symbol, or maybe just an indication I'm terrible at dressing." The princess let out a soft sound that might have been laughter or maybe a sigh of disbelief at his audacity. "You amuse me, human, and yet there is something else in you. I feel it, a desire to be understood. Not to conquer, not to impress, not to claim advantage." Elias scratched his temple. "You mean the tea thing wasn't the real reason?" Lysara's ears twitched so violently that he almost worried they'd detach. "Perhaps the tea is part of it. Humor often opens the mind where formal words fail, but yes, I sense sincerity." Elias felt a wave of relief. "Sincerity is my default setting. Though I'd be happy to upgrade to heroic diplomat if you'd prefer." He gave a mock bow that nearly sent him floating backward. Lysara caught the movement with a swift gesture of her hand, her fingers leaving ripples of light in the air. "You are unusual," she said, and there was no judgment in the tone, only curiosity. He grinned, realizing that maybe, just maybe, he was surviving the first audience without catastrophe. "I try. Mostly I try not to get vaporized. Secondarily, I try to make friends. And thirdly, if all else fails, I make bad jokes. Works on Earth. Hoping it works here too." The princess stepped closer, and he could feel the faint hum of energy radiating from her form. "Perhaps it does," she said, almost to herself. "Perhaps it does. But words are not enough, human. You must see, you must touch, you must experience our world, our logic, our culture to truly understand." Elias nodded, though his body seemed to have forgotten how to obey him in zero gravity. "Right. Experience. Got it. Totally doable. Nothing could possibly go wrong in a floating garden with glowing plants and, alien royalty asking questions." He paused. Well, except for the whole vaporization thing, but that's minor. Lysara's lips curved into a small, almost mischievous smile. Minor is relative, human, but perhaps for you it will remain minor. Elias laughed, a little too loud, letting the sound echo among the gardens. I'll hold you to that. And if not, I hope someone left a good insurance policy somewhere, or at least extra tea. And with that, they walked deeper into the suspended gardens, navigating floating bridges of light, dodging robotic butterflies, and exchanging barbed, humorous observations about each other's species. For the first time, Elias realized that perhaps, amidst the alien architecture, the levitating flora, and the awkward cultural divide, he might actually enjoy being understood, or at least survive the attempt. The floating orbs blinked, the petals shimmered, and Elias thought, not for the first time, that meeting an alien princess might be far more entertaining than he had ever imagined. Elias found himself gripping the edge of a hovering walkway with a combination of awe and mild panic, which was perhaps not the posture one should adopt in the company of a princess. Lysara floated ahead of him, moving with a fluid grace that made every human step look clumsy in comparison, and yet she seemed entirely unconcerned about his struggles with zero gravity, as though his fumbling were part of the entertainment she expected from visitors. "Careful, human," she said over her shoulder, her voice melodic and precise. "The currents here are subtle but insistent. One misstep and you may find yourself orbiting the ceiling indefinitely." "I've always wanted to experience permanent ceiling orbit," Elias muttered, arms flailing as he corrected his trajectory. "Not sure it's on the official tourism brochures, though." His attempt at levity seemed to amuse her, and he caught the faintest upward twitch of her ears. The walkway extended into a section of the city that Elias had only glimpsed from the orbital lifts before. A cluster of floating gardens suspended in open space, tethered to each other by shimmering bridges of energy that pulsed like veins of light. Small drones buzzed past, carrying iridescent fruits that glowed faintly as if they stored tiny suns within their skins. Lysara gestured toward a hovering fountain that seemed to defy physics entirely, the water suspended in midair as a perfectly spinning helix of droplets. "Observe the mechanics of our environment," she said. "Every element is interdependent. Nothing here exists purely by chance." Elias nodded, though he had no idea how one might nod effectively without tumbling sideways. "Right. Interdependent, got it. Like my last relationship. Except with fewer floating water droplets and slightly more diplomacy." He gave a sheepish grin, immediately realizing that his humor might be either a bridge or a trap. Lysara's ears twitched again, this time in a rhythm he could only interpret as curiosity. "Explain yourself, human," she said. "Why humor? You are sincere, yet you weaponize levity. It is perplexing." "Ah," Elias said, adopting a mock contemplative pose while balancing midair. "Humor is the duct tape of human interaction. Keeps things from falling apart. Makes awkwardness more manageable. Also, it's cheaper than bribes or interstellar fines." She considered this in silence, her amber eyes scanning him as though she were measuring the weight of his sincerity against the absurdity of his words. "Perhaps you are unusual," she said finally. "Most humans would attempt to impress with declarations, not levity. You risk much with this approach." Elias shrugged, almost knocking into a floating orb that blinked at him like a small, judgmental eye. "Risk, sure. But honestly, if I impress you with grandiose declarations, I'd probably end up a cautionary tale in your history archives. At least with jokes, there's hope for forgiveness." Lysara tilted her head, regarding him with a mixture of amusement and curiosity. "You speak freely. Do you not fear reprisal?" "I fear a lot of things," he admitted, "mostly being vaporized or misinterpreted. But sincerity is a gamble I've occasionally survived." He gestured toward a hovering vine that wrapped itself around a luminous crystal, releasing tiny clouds of fragrant particles with each movement. "And sometimes it works better than strategy. Humans tend to overthink." Your logic is strange yet effective, Lysara said. Perhaps we overthink as well, though our measures are subtler. She paused, then offered a question that made Elias choke slightly on a laugh. Do your species always survive by stumbling forward blindly? Only the charming ones, he said. The rest, well, that's classified under unfortunate anecdotes. I like to think of myself as selectively fortunate. He attempted a modest bow, which caused him to spin lightly in midair and almost collide with a hovering blossom. See, graceful, mostly. The princess's eyes narrowed, though the effect was softened by the twitching of her ears. You deflect with humor, yet you reveal much. I detect empathy, curiosity, and, dare I say, a tendency to miscalculate danger deliberately. Do you understand the weight of your presence here? I understand it abstractly, Elias said, like reading the back of a cereal box while skydiving. Important details, but mostly guesswork. He grinned, feeling a flicker of relief at her attention. But I do know one thing. I want to understand. That's why I'm here. Not to conquer, not to impress, not to take, just to understand. Lysara floated closer, the ambient light catching her skin and making it glow faintly like moonlit water. Understanding is rare, she said softly. Most come with motives hidden behind words. You do not. She extended a hand, hovering just above a small, floating projection that displayed the orbital currents of the city. Observe this. Every movement, every interaction is connected. A small misstep can cascade unpredictably. Yet you navigate unpredictably yourself and survive. Elias leaned forward to peer at the projection, careful not to lose his balance. It's beautiful, he said. Kind of like life, I guess. Chaotic, weirdly structured, and occasionally terrifying. Also, I have no idea how this works. He reached out to touch the light currents, and they shimmered under his fingertips, flowing around his hand as though acknowledging him. Do these things have names? Should I be bowing, saluting, or complimenting them? They have names, Lysara replied. But names are less important than intent. Your curiosity is your own form of respect, human. You honor our world simply by attempting to engage with it. Elias tried to bow again with slightly better results and added, intent noted, respect noted, hopefully not crashing into orbital plant life noted as well. He gestured toward a small cluster of hovering flora that looked offended by his presence. Humor shields you, human, yet it does not mask the truth beneath it, Lysara said, her tone both analytical and quietly amused. I find myself intrigued. Most humans I have met are predictable, cautious, rehearsed. You are neither. Well, Elias said, floating closer to keep from drifting too far, predictable is boring, cautious is overrated, and rehearsed is exhausting. I recommend improvisation, though full disclosure, sometimes it backfires spectacularly. A soft ripple of light ran across the crystalline panels lining the walkway, as if the environment itself were acknowledging the honesty of his words. Lysara's ears twitched again, and for the first time, Elias saw a faint smile curve her lips. Perhaps there is value in chaos, she murmured, almost to herself. Elias grinned. I'm glad someone sees it that way. Otherwise, this whole interstellar diplomacy thing would be kind of terrifying. Still is, but less so with your approval. He gestured vaguely at the swirling gardens and the floating walkways, which glimmered in the soft light. Also, points for tea later, or whatever you drink here. I hear something herbal works wonders. You jest, Lysara said, though the faint upward twitch of her ears betrayed amusement. Yet you are sincere. I do not understand you entirely, human, but I find that I wish to. Elias floated a little closer, despite the careful awareness of currents that threatened to send him spinning. That's all I ask. Not permission, not treaty signatures, not interstellar fame, just the chance to be understood. And maybe in the process understand a few things about your world too. Lysara considered him in silence, and the world around them pulsed with quiet, radiant life. The floating plants twirled lazily, drones zipped overhead with tiny glowing fruits, and the light currents shifted as if responding to the subtle energy between them. "Perhaps we can begin," she said finally. "But understand this, humor alone will not suffice. You must observe, participate, and adapt. Your honesty will be tested, human, and you may falter." Elias gave a mock salute, nearly spinning in the process. "Faltering is part of the charm, also part of my survival strategy. Mostly. Hopefully. Okay, maybe I exaggerate, but that's a human specialty, right?" Lysara's eyes softened, and her ears twitched in a rhythm that Elias could only interpret as faint laughter, or at least amusement. "Human, you are peculiar, yet perhaps this is exactly the perspective I need. Come. I will show you a section of the city not often revealed to outsiders. Observe, interact, and perhaps learn." And so Elias floated beside her, arms flailing only slightly, as they moved into the heart of Kalara 7, the city a kaleidoscope of light, energy, and life. As he navigated the intricate pathways of levitating walkways and swirling gardens, he realized that diplomacy might not require caution alone. Sometimes, humor, sincerity, and a willingness to stumble spectacularly through unfamiliar worlds could be just as powerful as any carefully rehearsed speech. He made a mental note to survive, make jokes, and pay attention. That, he decided, would be a good strategy. And perhaps, just perhaps, he would come to understand this strange, floating city, and the enigmatic, long-eared princess guiding him through it, better than anyone else before him. Elias felt the hum of Kalara 7 beneath him more acutely than ever as he stepped, or rather floated, onto the wide observation platform overlooking the city's lower sectors. Lysara hovered beside him, long ears twitching in a rhythm that he had learned to interpret as her version of thoughtful curiosity, and for a moment he allowed himself to marvel at the alien skyline. The energy streams arcing between the crystalline towers glimmered like veins of liquid light, and hovering vehicles zipped through them with precision that made Earth's traffic look like a toddler's game of blocks. He tried to stand tall, but the zero-gravity currents had other ideas, sending him careening slightly before he righted himself with a sheepish smile. "I'm fairly certain humans weren't built for sightseeing in floating cities," he quipped. "Humans are adaptable," Lysara replied, a faint smile tracing her lips. "But your species' awkwardness is consistent." "I like to think of it as charming," Elias said, "though consistency might not always work in my favor. Like the last time I accidentally set off a cafeteria anti-gravity field and became an unintended dessert delivery system." He flailed his hands, mimicking the incident, and she allowed herself a small laugh, the sound tinkling through the platform like wind chimes in zero gravity. The purpose of this outing, however, was not merely sightseeing. The city below had been experiencing minor disturbances in its orbital traffic grids, a problem that had escalated to near-chaotic levels when rogue drones began veering into restricted airspace. Elias had been invited, an invitation that both amused and terrified him, to observe and understand the mechanisms behind the anomalies alongside Lysara. "This way," she said, guiding him to a narrower platform that extended over the heart of the lower sectors. A translucent dome beneath them revealed a network of energy conduits and drifting cargo pods, some illuminated with bioluminescent markings. Elias followed, careful not to collide with the floating maintenance bots buzzing like metallic bees. "Observe the patterns," she instructed. "All traffic flows are interconnected. A disruption in one node can propagate unpredictably, as you have seen." "Unpredictably," Elias repeated, raising an eyebrow. "You mean like me at formal dinners?" He stumbled slightly, catching himself against a rail. "Because if that's the case, I might be the perfect human to study this." Lysara's ears twitched sharply, and she raised an eyebrow. "You jest, yet you speak the truth. Observation without interference is essential, yet you are already influencing this environment simply by existing within it." He chuckled, floating closer. "I'll take that as a compliment. Or a warning. Or both. Again, zero-gravity etiquette is tricky. Their path led them to a cluster of energy nodes where the traffic anomalies were most pronounced. Elias observed as Lysara deftly manipulated control panels with gestures, causing the grids to pulse and shift. One of the rogue drones zipped toward a cargo pod at high speed, and he instinctively reached out, knocking it slightly off course. "Oops," he said, spinning midair to regain balance. "I hope I didn't make it worse." Instead, the drone righted itself, responding to a corrective signal that Lysara had already initiated. "You have intuition," she said, watching him with an expression that blended wonder and disbelief. "Few humans can act decisively without prior knowledge, yet you do, and sometimes it works." Elias grinned. "Improvisation. It's what humans do best when rules are optional, or confusing, or involve floating cities." He gestured vaguely at the glittering chaos below. "And yes, occasionally I wing it spectacularly." They moved through the network, their interactions blending observation, instruction, and occasional commentary from Elias that drew faint smiles from Lysara. He noted how her long ears twitched when amused, flicked when curious, and flattened slightly when irritated by minor malfunctions, a subtle language he had grown adept at reading. Over the course of the day, he began to anticipate her reactions, offering suggestions before she even asked, often paired with humor to diffuse tension. At one point, a cargo drone malfunctioned spectacularly, spinning wildly toward a cluster of suspended food pods. Elias lunged, catching it just in time, and muttered, "This is why I wasn't made for space travel, fear of gravity-defying dessert." Lysara's laugh was audible, genuine this time, and it rang through the control hub. "Your humor is persistent," she said, though the amusement in her voice softened the critique. By evening, the anomalies had been corrected, and the city's orbital traffic flowed smoothly once more. Elias and Lysara floated toward a higher terrace, overlooking the horizon where Kelara 7 energy arcs merged with the glowing void of space. He felt a quiet sense of accomplishment, though tempered by exhaustion. "I guess I survived," he said, "and maybe even helped, barely, though I probably deserve a medal or at least a strong cup of whatever your tea equivalent is." "You have learned much," Lysara said, her amber eyes reflecting the luminescence of the city below. "You have observed, adapted, and influenced without arrogance or deceit. You understand more than many humans would ever hope to understand." Elias floated a little closer, smiling. "Understanding is easier when the teacher lets you fumble spectacularly. Honestly, I think I've grown more today than in all my previous diplomatic missions combined, though my dignity might still be in recovery." He gestured at his rumpled attire and slightly singed boots. "Appearance-wise, I've suffered, but spiritually, I'd say thriving." She regarded him silently for a long moment. Then, with an unexpected gentleness, she extended her hand. "Elias, you came with no pretense, no hidden motives, only curiosity and honesty. That is rare, and it is valued." He took her hand, marveling at the warmth and energy that flowed from her, despite the alien physiology. "Well," he said with a small grin, "I suppose honesty and curiosity aren't just cheap tactics. Who knew they could actually work in interstellar diplomacy?" "You have changed," Lysara said softly. "Not only have you navigated this city, this environment, this culture, you have also adapted. Learned to see our world as it truly is, beyond your expectations, beyond preconceptions. And I have learned from you as well. Perhaps I underestimated your species." Elias blinked. "Learning from me? Really? I mostly tripped over things, asked too many questions, and made jokes that probably shouldn't exist in a royal court." He laughed, the sound echoing in the terrace's open air. "Glad it worked out, though." "It did," Lysara said, smiling faintly. "Your approach, sincerity coupled with levity, has value. Not all humans need follow protocol. Some can create understanding, through connection, through honesty, through laughter. You are such a human." Elias felt a flush of pride and disbelief. "Well, I'll take it. I suppose surviving a zero-gravity disaster zone, correcting rogue drones and explaining interspecies humor qualifies as growth. And now I even understand a little bit of you. He hesitated, then added, though I think your ears are the secret to everything. Seriously, if I could only understand ear language, I'd be unstoppable. Lysara's laughter, soft and musical, filled the space around them. Perhaps you will continue to learn, human. There is much yet to observe, much yet to understand. And you, despite your chaotic approach, have proven capable. You have bridged a gap many thought impossible. The two floated in quiet camaraderie for a time, observing the city in calm reflection. Elias realized that he had begun to see Kelara 7 not as an alien place of danger, but as a world of connection, complexity, and unexpected warmth. He had entered as a visitor, unsure of what to expect, armed with only curiosity and humor, and emerged with insight, confidence, and an unexpected friendship. Finally, as the artificial stars of the orbital city shimmered around them, Elias said, "So, what now?" More floating gardens, tea, rogue drone herding, Lysara's amber eyes sparkled. Now we continue, observation, understanding, exploration, perhaps together, human. Elias nodded, a grin tugging at his lips. I can do that. I think I've earned the right to stumble spectacularly through the universe with a princess who has remarkably expressive ears. She inclined her head, the faintest laugh escaping her lips. And perhaps, human, that is exactly what the universe needs. Honesty, humor, and courage, sometimes in equal measure. As they drifted across the observation terrace, Elias felt a profound shift within himself. He was no longer merely a visitor navigating alien politics. He was a participant in a living world, capable of bridging divides, embracing difference, and finding laughter and understanding in the most improbable of circumstances. The city below hummed with light and life, but above it all, he and Lysara shared a quiet triumph, the result of curiosity, sincerity, and the subtle power of humor. And in that moment, floating side by side with the long-eared princess, Elias knew he had changed, not just in skill or knowledge, but in perception, in courage, and in heart. The journey had begun with awkward jokes and uncertainty, but it ended with connection, insight, and the unmistakable sense that bridges, interstellar or otherwise, could indeed be built, one sincere, humorous step at a time. The city lights shimmered beneath them, the energy flows steady, the rogue drones now obedient, and for the first time Elias felt entirely at home in a world that had once seemed utterly alien. He smiled, looked at Lysara, and realized that understanding was not a destination. It was a shared path, illuminated by curiosity, honesty, and laughter. And as the stars of Kelara 7 twinkled like distant fires, he floated forward, ready for whatever the next step might bring, no longer afraid to